Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks and take them through a friendly league on Magic Online. This week we're taking a look at green-white Hexproof in Modern, also known as Bogles. This is a deck running a whole bunch of 1/1 creatures for 1 with Hexproof, like Slippery Bogle and Gladecover Scout, meaning that they're very difficult for the opponent to interact with, since most removal spells in the format cannot deal with hexproof creatures, so that means that they're pretty safe to enchant with a whole bunch of aura enchantments, which is most of the rest of the deck. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with one of the many aura enchantments, Cartouche of Solidarity, as a nice one-off, giving the enchanted creature +1/+1 on first strike, as well as making a 1/1 warrior creature token with vigilance. So here the warrior token is actually quite valuable against opposing edict effects, like Liliana of the Veil or perhaps Smallpox, forcing us to sacrifice a creature. And of course, if our only creature is one of our hexproof creatures that's enchanted with a whole bunch of auras, then we're pretty sad. But if we can simply sacrifice our warrior creature token instead, then we can go along with our business. Then we have 4 copies of Ethereal Armor, one of the more powerful enchantments in the deck, giving the enchanted creature +1/+1 for each enchantment we control, as well as first strike. And of course, since we're gonna load up our creatures with a whole bunch of enchantments, and most of the deck is enchantments, then Ethereal Armor is gonna give our creature a very big boost. Then we have 1 copy of Gryff's Boon, giving the enchanted creature +1/+0 and flying, which is very valuable against opposing evasive creatures, like for example the Affinity deck with a lot of evasive creatures where an Inkmoth Nexus could kill us out of nowhere. And we can also return the Gryff's Boon from our graveyard to the battlefield attached to one of our creatures, should it somehow get discarded or destroyed. Then we have 4 copies of Hyena Umbra, giving the enchanted creature +1/+1 and first strike, as well as having totem armor, so should our enchanted creature somehow get destroyed, for example by a sweeper effect, then instead of destroying the creature we can simply destroy the Hyena Umbra and save our valuable hexproof creature. Then we have 2 copies of Path to Exile for some main deck creature removal on our side. Then of course 4 copies of Gladecover Scout, 4 copies of Rancor, which is another very powerful enchantment, giving our creature +2/+0 and trample, as well as if Rancor would be put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we get to return it to our hand right away. Then 4 copies of Spider Umbra, which is similar to Hyena Umbra, but instead of giving first strike it gives reach, which is also nice against evasive threats. Then the 4 Slippery Bogles. And then our other 4-off creature in the deck is Kor Spiritdancer, which does not have hexproof, but it is very powerful in the deck nonetheless, since Kor Spiritdancer gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it, and whenever we cast an aura spell, even if it doesn't target our Spiritdancer, we get to draw a card right away, so it doesn't even have to resolve, which means that Kor Spiritdancer is a nice draw engine for the deck that can keep fueling us with more enchantments, as well as against the decks that don't have removal for it, very quickly being able to kill the opponent. Then we have 1 copy of Spirit Mantle, giving the enchanted creature +1/+1 and protection from creatures, which is of course great against opposing creature decks. 1 main deck copy of Suppression Field, since we're not running any fetch lands ourselves. Activated abilities cost 2 more to be activated unless they're mana abilities, and we don't have any activated abilities in the main deck except for the Gryff's Boon activation, which doesn't come up a whole lot. So 1 main deck copy of Suppression Field can get some people that might not expect it. Then another very powerful card in the deck is Daybreak Coronet, double white enchantment that can only enchant a creature that already has an aura attached to it, but then the enchanted creature does get +3/+3, first strike, vigilance and lifelink, so a very powerful aura if we can make it work. And then 2 more copies of Silhana Ledgewalker, another hexproof creature, just to round out our creature base to make sure we always have one of these creatures in our opening hand. So Silhana Ledgewalker also as a bonus cannot be blocked except by creatures with flying, so having some built-in evasion is also nice. And then finally 1 copy of Unflinching Courage, giving the enchanted creature +2/+2, trample and lifelink. Then our mana base is pretty simple. For our budget deck here we've got 4 forests, 4 plains, 4 Razorverge Thickets, 3 Sunpetal Grove and 4 Temple Garden, just to make sure we can have green on turn 1 for our hexproof creatures, as well as double white for our Daybreak Coronet at some point. So the only budget considerations in the main deck is that we're not running any fetch lands, and that we're not running any Horizon Canopies, which are quite expensive, but of course have a nice effect of letting us draw a card if we're out of gas. And then the other budget consideration is that we're not running any Ley Lines of Sanctity, which are usually a staple in this deck, protecting us from all sorts of effects. But they are quite pricey, and you don't always have them in your opening hand, so not having them is not the end of the world. Then going over the sideboard, we have 2 more copies of Path to Exile to round out the 2 main deck copies. We've got 2 copies of Spirit Link against the aggressive burn decks, giving the enchanted creature the ability to gain life whenever it deals damage, which is not the same as lifelink, since if you put this on a creature that already has lifelink, you actually get to gain the life twice, which is quite relevant. Then we have 1 spicy copy of Leonin Arbiter, since we don't have any fetch lands ourselves, so we can afford to play one, and this can come in against opposing decks with a lot of fetch lands or search effects like Scapeshift. Then we also have 2 copies of Rest in Peace against the graveyard decks, also nice that it's an enchantment, boosting up our Ethereal Armors. And then in the same vein we have 2 copies of Stony Silence that can come in against Affinity and various artifact-based decks. And then another copy of Suppression Field if we really want another copy. 1 copy of Rule of Law, which is mainly for the Storm decks, allowing players to only cast 1 spell each turn. Then we have 2 copies of Sundering Growth in the sideboard, which we are playing over Seal of Primordium, mainly because we have the suppression fields that work against the Seal of Primordium, as well as Populate being irrelevant with our Cartouche of Solidarity, so that can come up. And then we have 2 copies of Gaddock Teeg, which can come in against combo decks and control decks that rely on non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater, and can also stop X spells, like for example Engineered Explosives, that can be a pretty big problem for the deck otherwise. So that's the deck, and now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and let's take a look at our opening hand, which doesn't have any white mana unfortunately, but we do have our Ledgewalker, as well as Rancor, and of course as soon as we draw white mana we can deploy these other auras. It's a little risky against opposing hand disruption spells since we don't get to play a creature on turn 1, but I think overall this is probably still a keep. So let's go Forest Go. Opponent with a Plains into Ether Vial, so this could be a Hate Bears deck. And there's our Bogle a turn late, but I think we'll still run out our Ledgewalker instead here, since that has some built-in evasion already. Opponent takes up their Ether Vial and doesn't play anything, and there's Temple Garden, perfect. So now we get to go Rancor plus Ethereal Armor. So let's play that untapped. Put an Ethereal Armor on our Ledgewalker, as well as a Rancor, and get in for 5. And we could have also played our Slippery Bogle there, we probably should have done that, but skipped through our second main phase a little too quickly. Opponent takes up their Vial to 2, still on mono planes, and still no play from our opponent. So let's go ahead and put another Ethereal Armor on our Ledgewalker, and attack for 9. Opponent takes it down to 6, and now we will play out our Bogles here. Not sure if we should play around perhaps a Wrath of God effect. I guess we'll keep 1 Bogle in hand just in case our opponent has main deck Wrath of Gods, in which case we probably should have played our Umbra instead of the Ethereal Armor, but we wanted to get in for more damage this turn. And there we see Serra Avenger. So our opponent definitely some sort of Death and Taxes Hate Bears deck, but it's gonna be tough for them, especially game 1, to interact with our hexproof creatures. Opponent gets in for 3 in the air. Our opponent with a Flicker Wisp, which is going to flicker one of our Ethereal Armors. And when it comes back, we are simply going to re-enchant our same creature. So it doesn't really do much there. And might as well put our Hyena Umbra on our creature. If our opponent has another Flicker Wisp, they could flicker away the Rancor and then chum block. But that's about it. And looks like our opponent does have another Flicker Wisp here. So they can flicker the Rancor and buy another turn, essentially. But they are forced to chum block, so they will only be able to attack back for 6. And sure, let's run out the Gladecover Scout here. And pass a turn. And the Rancor will go back to our Ledgewalker. So will our opponent be able to produce even more Flicker Wisps and keep attacking us in the air, is the question. They ticked up Ether Vial to 4, so they might have actually Restoration Angel that they want to use to flicker the Flicker Wisp. But we do have the Path to Exile now that can exile the Flicker Wisp in response. So they will not be able to flicker away the Rancor. So Serra Avenger gets in for another 3 damage. We're down to 12. Opponent is going to play another Flicker Wisp, flickering the plains this time. So they do have 1 mana available, but let's just go ahead and go to combat here with our Ledgewalker. See if our opponent has the Restoration Angel, otherwise they are dead. So they do have something to violin for 4, it is indeed Restoration Angel. It's gonna wanna target the Flicker Wisp, but in response we can path it. And if this works, so I guess they're not technically dead, but they will have to put a whole bunch of creatures in front of our Ledgewalker here. And they're just gonna concede. Alright, on to sideboarding. Up against mono-white Hate Bears. So what could they bring in? They probably have a bunch of enchantment removal in the sideboard. I could see bringing in our Path to Exiles, as the opponent having a Thalia in play, for example, could be pretty annoying. And our opponent is, of course, a creature deck. What do we want to take out is the question. I could see an argument for shaving a few Daybreak Coronets, since if the opponent has a whole bunch of Flicker Wisps, they can flicker away our first aura, and then the Coronet might fall off, which is not what we want to have happen. Spirit Dancer could be vulnerable to Path to Exile, but that's about it, and they might even shave some Path to Exiles after sideboard. So I don't think we want to take out the Spirit Dancer, so I could get behind getting rid of some Coronets here, just to play it safe. It is a very powerful effect if we can connect, but if our opponent does have those Flicker Wisps, then they could mess up our plans. Opponent might have a Worship, perhaps, after sideboard, in which case we do want the Sundering Growths in our deck, but that's also pretty narrow. So let's try it like this. And this hand looks quite perfect. We've got the Gladecover Scout as well as the Spirit Dancer, and then some quality enchantments. Opponent with Plains Go, so now we get to go either Temple Garden Gladecover Scout, or we could just go Forest Gladecover Scout. If we want to double Ethereal Armor next turn, then we're forced to play the Temple Garden here, which I think we want to do. There's also the argument of wanting to play the Spirit Dancer first, just to draw those extra cards, but we'll reevaluate next turn based on what the opponent does. If, for example, they play a Thalia, then we might want to run out the Spirit Dancer first, and in fact they do. So now that we're only able to play one of our enchantments this turn, it's probably more appealing to simply play out the Spirit Dancer. That way, if the Spirit Dancer survives, we start drawing more cards, and if they use a Path to Exile, then we have more mana and we can cast 2 of our auras next turn instead of just 1. Of course, we don't want to go all in on the Spirit Dancer, since Flicker Wisp can flicker the Spirit Dancer and then we lose all our auras attached to it. So opponent with an Arbiter, so they might be setting up to either path us or Ghost Quarter us. But we found a Razorverge Thicket, which is a nice pickup here. So let's simply run out the Thickets and enchant or scout with one of our Ethereal Armors, I think, over the Spider Umbra, and then draw a card from the Spirit Dancer. Find a Bogle. And I don't think our opponent's gonna have any Ratchet Bomb or Engineered Explosive type effects, so I'm pretty comfortable running out the Bogle here. And we're not gonna attack into the Thalia, since we would lose the Scout. Still only planes from the opponents. Do they have a path for the Spirit Dancer? They don't, they have a Blade Splicer, making a 3/3 Golem token. And there's our own Path to Exile. Alright, so I think this turn we're just going to load up our Gladecover Scout and then draw 2 cards from the Spirit Dancer, so we can start by playing out, I think, an Ethereal Armor on the Scout. Draw a card from the Spiritdancer. Find a Ledgewalker. And then we'll run out the Spider Umbra as well. And Rancor is perfect for next turn, so do we want to attack here? Opponent might just jump with the Blade Splicer and then we'll take a bunch of damage on the way back. I could see just keeping the Gladecover Scout on defense for a turn until we can play the Rancor as well. Which might be a bit too safe, but I don't think getting in for 8 and then getting attacked back for 7 is the way to go here. So let's just pass. Of course, now I wish we did not take out those Daybreak Coronets. Smuggler's Copter, interesting. Did cost them 3 mana because of Thalia, but does give them an evasive threat. And I think we just start by playing Rancor here. Draw another card. Find another Spiritdancer, alright. That's not bad, since now we get to draw 2 cards. But now I think it's time to start attacking with our Gladecover Scout. So let's get in for 12. And now we have Trample, so chum blocking is no longer an option. Opponent does crew Smuggler's Copter. So they might want to loot here. Instead looks like they're just gonna take the 12. And then in our second main phase, we could run out our Spiritdancer and then play a tap Temple Garden, or we can keep a Path to Exile and then play a tap Temple Garden and keep the Spiritdancer for next turn. I kind of don't mind keeping a Path to Exile here in case your opponent has a Flicker Wisp on their Blade Splicer. So let's just play this tapped and pass the turn, and then next turn we can go Spiritdancer plus an Aura if we draw one. Opponent with a Tectonic Edge. And they're going for Oblivion Ring, so that might target our Rancor here. And indeed it does. So that's fine. We no longer have Trample. Opponent does crew the Copter, and I think we will just path the Smuggler's Copter here. Prevent our opponent from finding the cards they are looking for. Opponent does not get to search because of their own Leonin Arbiter, so that's nice. And there's another Spiritdancer. Alright, so if we do at some point find an Aura, we're in business. But for now, I think we'll just get in for 8. And our opponent's forced to chum block here. And they block with the Arbiter. I'm okay with running out all our creatures here. There's not too many effects we need to play around that I can think of. And this way, if we do find an Aura next turn, we get to draw 3 cards and we'll be able to spend all our mana. Land number 5, so if they do have a Wrath of God, they can cast it now through Thalia. But we would still keep our Scouts with 2 Ethereal Armors on it. Instead it's another Blade Splicer. But no attacks from our opponent. And no Aura for us, unfortunately. And now we no longer have great attacks since our opponent has 8 power of first striking creatures. So if we attack with the Gladecover Scout, our opponent can just triple block, and then we would be trading essentially the Spider Umbra for the opponent's first striking creatures. That might still be okay, actually. Yeah, let's still attack here and see if our opponent wants to chump with the 1/1 or make the trade of all the first strike creatures. Looks like just a chum block, which is fine. And now I will keep the Scout in hand, just to represent having Path to Exile. Triple Tectonic Edge from the opponent, so they can blow up some lands, but I don't know if that really is their plan at this point. Another Copter, and a Flicker Wisp to flicker the Blade Splicer to make another Golem. Alright, can we draw an Aura? We can, and it's a Hyena Umbra. So at this point, I think I'm okay with putting this on one of our Kor Spiritdancers instead of our Gladecover Scout, or we could even consider enchanting our Ledgewalker. With all the cards we draw, we can probably find some more auras, and the Gladecover Scout is already gonna get boosted by the Ethereal Armors getting bigger, so I don't really see a reason to put more on the Gladecover Scout that's already lethal. So it's between putting it on the Spiritdancer to make it bigger, or putting it on a Ledgewalker which has built-in evasion. I think putting it on the Ledgewalker makes sense, just to play around flicker or path effects. And then we'll draw a whole bunch. Just some lands for now. Alright, so got rid of 3 lands off the top of our deck. Still not bad. And then we'll run out the Sunpetal Grove and attack with our Gladecover Scout. Opponent chumps with Thalia. And we'll say go. Opponent's empty-handed, but they will get to loot with the Smuggler's Copter here. Copter gets crewed, gets in there, and their opponent found another Blade Splicer, so they keep making more chump blockers on the ground. And unfortunately another land draw here for us. So we're actually not in a great spot, so I don't even feel comfortable attacking with our Gladecover Scout, since I would rather keep it on defense to stop the Copter and the Golems. So I think we're just gonna run out a tapped Thicket here. Could have attacked with the Ledgewalker. Opponents could only block with the Flicker Wisp there. But again, I feel like if we can play defense until we can find a string of auras, we're fine. Copter does get in there. Could be a suicide attack into the Gladecover Scout just to draw and discard. Since we do have reach, probably should have attacked with our Ledgewalker last turn, but... So Smuggler's Copter down, and there's an Ether Vial, not the best top deck at this point. And still another land off the top, not what we needed. But now I think I'm okay with attacking with our Ledgewalker. Question is, do we get in with our Scout as well? Would get chumped by the Blade Splicer. Opponent has quite a lot of power on the way back. I guess we can get in with the Gladecover Scout as well now. And then if the opponent does go on the offensive with their Golems, we can just chump with a bunch of Bogles. Our opponent does chump and takes 2. And then in our second main phase, we will run out the Scout. And we want to keep playing our lands, since with all these Spiritdancers, we might be able to use up all our mana. Opponent does get in with their Flyer. And they have another Flicker Wisp to flicker their Flicker Wisp, so they can have it on defense as well. And then they're gonna flicker the Ethereal Armor, which does not come back until our next turn. So now our Gladecover Scout is just a 5/5, so can no longer make any great attacks. So Bogle the draw, not great, so we'll just attack with our Ledgewalker here that can still attack into the 2 Flicker Wisps. Opponent does decide to chump with Flicker Wisp. And then I think we still keep running out the Bogles, since they might be useful as chumpers for the Golem tokens. And I do keep playing out my lands. So now the Ethereal Armor comes back. We might actually want to attach it to the Ledgewalker at this point instead of the Gladecover Scout. Or perhaps even a Spiritdancer, but that's still bad against Flicker Wisps. So I think we just put it on the Ledgewalker here. And now we have a 6/6 evasive creature, and they're forced to chump with Flicker Wisp, otherwise they're dead. So flickering that Ethereal Armor might have been a mistake from the opponent's part, who knows. And no attacks. And can we get an aura? We can, it's a Rancor. So now we get to draw loads of cards. And now we're in business. Since we can go off here. And I think we keep going, since their opponent might have some interaction, but they're just gonna concede here. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play. And this hand looks okay. Of course, we do need a second land, but even if we don't, we can still go Bogle, Umbra, play the Scout, and if we do find a second land, then we have double Spiritdancer plus Coronet, so yeah, I think this is a keep. And we will in fact lead with Slippery Bogle. Our opponent with Island Serum Visions, so could be any blue deck. And we untap and draw Ethereal Armor. We have to decide between Ethereal Armor or Hyena Umbra. Given that our opponent's playing blue, they might have counter spells, and it's more important to resolve the Ethereal Armor, so I'm gonna lead with that. And get in for 2. Glacial Fortress, so opponent might be on blue-white control, as they Spreading Seas our only land. That's pretty painful, but luckily we draw a Temple Garden. So here we have to decide between playing the Spiritdancer or running out Hyena Umbra. So we definitely want to play the Hyena Umbra at some point to protect against Supreme Verdict. And that would also allow us to get in for 5 right now. However, setting up Spiritdancer to draw extra cards also is pretty appealing. If they have another Spreading Seas for our land, that would be pretty painful, since then we can't play the Hyena Umbra, but I think we have to run the risk. So I think we just go for the Spiritdancer here. If they path the Spiritdancer, that's perfect, since then we have a second one plus the Umbra. So let's take 2, play the Spiritdancer, get in for 2, and say go. And hope they don't have a second Spreading Seas. It looks like they're just gonna keep up a counterspell, which doesn't work great against Spiritdancer since we still get to draw the card. So now the question is, which aura do we lead with? I think the Spider Umbra is more valuable, so I'm probably just gonna run out the Hyena Umbra in case they have a mana leak. And let's see if they do. I'll draw a card, find a Rancor, that's pretty good. And they do in fact have mana leak, so they could be setting up for Supreme Verdict for next turn, which would get rid of our Slippery Bogle, but we still have a pretty good hand to follow up, especially if we draw some lands, so I'm not too worried. Get in for 2, and say go. And do they have land verdict? They do, so Bogle's gone, but we have another one to follow up. Could even consider playing out the Kor Spiritdancer here. The problem with playing Spiritdancer is if they answer it with some sort of removal spell, we don't get any value out of it, since we can't go Spiritdancer plus play an aura in the same turn. So I think we just run out the Scout for now and say go. Make them have another verdict. Opponent has a Gideon ally of Zendikar in the main deck. It's a little surprising, but certainly good for them here. But that does mean we get to resolve our spells next turn, and especially if we can find a land, that would be great. And we do, perfect, so now we get to go Spiritdancer plus play one of our auras. And I think we want to resolve the Spider Umbra in case of another verdict, although it is also pretty appealing to resolve Rancor, since having that in play means that even if they verdict we get it back. But I think it's too important for our creatures to survive, so I think we need to Spiritdancer and Spider Umbra the Scout. Draw a card. Find a forest. Not as good as a plains here because of the coronets, but we'll take it. No attacks, since we don't want to trade here. Say go. Serum Visions and a Ghost Quarter. So they can still Cryptic Command us if they Ghost Quarter their own land. So we have to keep that in mind. And Gideon is going to get in there, and the opponent's going to hit us for 7. Or only 5. And then keep the knight on defense, that's fine. I'll definitely take it here. And the follow-up is another Gideon, and apparently the new rules have already been implemented in that the opponent can have both Gideons in play at the same time, which of course makes having multiple Gideons a lot better than it used to be. But Gideon of the Trials, the +1 ability here is not going to do a whole lot. So instead the opponent makes an emblem, forcing us to get rid of the opponent's Gideons before we get to win the game. And they're going to draw step Path to Exile the Spirit Dancer, which is pretty annoying, since we won't get any value off of our auras here. So yeah, that happens. And we will go search up a Plains. And we drew a Forest for return, so I guess we're just suiting up the Gladecover Scout with the Rancor and Daybreak Coronet here. And then the question is, who or what do we attack? So let's start by suiting up our Scout. Put a Rancor on it, put a Coronet on it. So now we have a 7/5 with First Strike, Lifelink, Reach, Trample and Vigilance. Which means we can actually take down Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which I think is our biggest threat at this point. So I think we'll attack Gideon Ally of Zendikar here. And even if the opponent chumps, we will trample over and kill Gideon. So I don't think we'll see a block here. Plus we still have an Umbra in case of Verdict. So we're in an okay spot here, but we can definitely still lose this game if our opponent chains a bunch of cryptic commands. They could also have Detention Sphere to get rid of our Daybreak Coronet. Instead we see Jace, Architect of Thought. Not the best on this board, so they're just gonna mine us right away. And we have to divide these into 2 piles. The opponent gets to keep one of the piles. So I think we just put the Path to Exile and the Gideon of the Trials in one pile, since those are pretty useless, and they'll probably just take Gideon Ally of Zendikar. And actually they did take the Gideon of the Trials and Path to Exile there over the Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which is a little surprising. Opponent pluses on our lands, says go. Alright, we did find a Kor Spiritdancer, so we can actually play the Kor Spiritdancer and play the Coronets and draw a card. Of course the opponent did take the pile with Path to Exile, so they can actually deal with the Spiritdancer, but still getting a card out of it seems okay. This is only bad if our opponent has the Detention Sphere for the Coronet, since then they get to take both Coronets with it. But I think we still go for it here. So we can play Spiritdancer, play out another Coronet, draw a card from Spiritdancer, find a land. So now, who do we attack? I think we need to start by dealing with the Jace, since they can easily find some relevant cards like Cryptic Commands, multiple Supreme Verdicts that we don't want them to draw. So I think we need to cut off the Jace first, and then we can grind through the Gideons. Let's attack Jace, Architect of Thought, gain some life at the same time. And then in the second main, I think I'll still play out the land, since with the Kor Spiritdancer you never know how many auras you end up drawing. And they're gonna start with the Spreading Seas, which is fine. Another Spreading Seas, alright. Opponent in full land destruction mode here. Opponent pluses on Spiritdancer. And that's it. And we drew a Ledgewalker. Alright, so opponent's gonna draw step Path us once again, which is fine. So now, do we attack our opponent, or do we start grinding through the Gideons? Since we know our opponent has another Gideon, I kind of like hitting the opponent here first, and then we can potentially start attacking the Gideons once our opponent's on a lower life total, where perhaps we can suit up 2 creatures and then kill Gideon and our opponent in the same turn. So yeah, I think we attack our opponent here. Opponent takes 10 to 4. So now the question is, do we want to deploy the Ledgewalker? Or do we want to play around multiple Supreme Verdicts? I think we still play out the Ledgewalker here, since the damage could be relevant. Opponent now does have enough mana to Cryptic Command, bounce the Umbra and then Supreme Verdict. So that would be kind of a bad scenario. Instead they have another Gideon, so apparently the opponent's playing quite a few Gideons in their deck. They're gonna make a token, but they still can't really interact with our Scout. And there's another Coronet. I think we want to keep this Coronet for our Ledgewalker in case we draw another aura. So I think we just kill Ally of Zendikar, and then a Ledgewalker can hit our opponent for 1, I think. over-attacking Gideon of the Trials. So let's start by attacking Ally of Zendikar here with this one, and this one goes at our opponent. Gideon down, opponent at 3, and we'll just pass a turn here. Serum Visions, another Colonnade, which is relevant now since that can block our Ledgewalker. Gideon's gonna plus on a land, and we find another Scout. That one I think I'll keep in hand. I think we just want to attack our opponent with the Gladecover Scout. Our opponent's not gonna die because of the Gideon emblem, but I don't want to attack Gideon since our opponent has another one in hand, so they can just replay that one. So I would rather put our opponent at a negative life total and then deal with the Gideon next turn, since there's no ultimate we need to worry about here. And our opponent can animate Colonnade, but they still only have 8 power, so we can still safely attack with the Scout here, I think. Since we have First Strike, among other things. Opponent's at -7. And I think we just say go here. And then next turn, hopefully, we can get rid of our opponent's last Gideon. They're gonna plus. And there's a verdict. So Spider Umbra saves the day, but our opponent might still have Cryptic Command here to tap down the Gladecover Scout. They don't have enough mana to animate the Colonnade, so I think we start by attacking. If they tap down, at least they don't counter the Hyena Umbra. I guess they could bounce one of the auras, but I think that's still better than running the Umbra into the counter mode of Cryptic Command. So let's move to combat. Attack Gideon of the Trials. And do they have the Cryptic Command? Nope. And alright, on to game 2 against Gideon Control. What do we want against Gideon Control? So Gaddock Teeg seems pretty good, as it counters Gideon's and Cryptic Commands and Supreme Verdicts. Suppression Field seems pretty good as well, as it stops Planeswalker activations as well as fetch lands. Unflinching Courage, the Trample could be relevant against those Knight tokens from Gideon, but overall the lifelink is not too important and it's pretty expensive, so I think we can cut it. Path is pretty weak, but it can answer Colonnades and Gideons if they do get activated, so they're not completely useless, but perhaps still worth cutting. So we can probably shave the 2 paths here and try something like this. I guess Spirit Mantle is also pretty weak, but it's still an enchantment to boost our Ethereal Armors to draw cards from Spiritdancer, which I think we want to keep in a deck despite our opponent having removal for it. So I think we just keep all our enchantments and then hope we won't need the Path to Exiles and run it like this. Alright, our opening hand looks pretty good. We don't have an Umbra, so we are weak to Supreme Verdict, but we can potentially have a pretty quick start with double Ethereal Armor Daybreak Coronet, although we are missing double white, so we can't play the 2 armors on turn 2, nor can we play the Coronet. But overall, I think we still have to keep this one. Opponent also kept their 7, as they lead with a Scry land. And Sunpetal Grove is a good draw there, so we can lead with Temple Garden, so we'll have access to double white next turn, play a Bogle, and say go. Opponent with Flooded Strand, they're gonna crack it right away. Could be a Spreading Seas here. Yep. So the Sunpetal Grove now, I think still, yeah, it doesn't have types Forest Plains anymore, so the Sunpetal Grove actually does come into play tapped, unfortunately. I think we want to run the Forest first, since if we run out the Sunpetal Grove, it might also get Spreading Seized, which would be pretty bad. Instead, if we play the Forest first and then Sunpetal Grove, then we will be able to at least play 1 white spell. Can actually also run out the Bogle through the Spreading Seas here, since it's blue as well. But I don't think we want to deploy another creature before we have the Umbra safely on the Bogle. I think we just want to hit for 1, play Forest, say go. Wall of Omens, that's fine. Our creature will be bigger at some point. A reason to play the Sunpetal Grove, of course, is if we draw another white source like we just did, we would have been able to play 2 white spells, but of course the risk of running into another Spreading Seas is pretty significant. So instead, I think we'll just deploy the Umbra, which I think is more important than the armor, since our opponent is approaching Verdict mana, and then we can play the armors next turn, play Umbra, and say go. Opponent does deploy Gideon of the Trials, and they're just gonna plus and say go. Alright, so I think we just wanna double Ethereal Armor, since playing Daybreak Coronet is pretty risky into potential cryptic commands bouncing the Umbra and then dropping off the Coronet. So let's just pay 2 life here, and then Ethereal Armor, and then Ethereal Armor once again. And then we'll just attack the Gideon right away, I think. Or we can go after the opponent's life total. I guess we just attack our opponents. They're probably just gonna block with the wall anyways. And in fact they do. And we'll just say go. So the opponent needs multiple Supreme Verdicts here to kill our Bogle, or a way to bounce the Umbra and then Verdict. The Tension Sphere would also be pretty good, taking care of both the Ethereal Armors. Gideon makes an Emblem. And we do see Verdict taking care of the Umbra there. So we're in a rough spot here if our opponent has another Verdict, but I don't think we can really afford to play around it too much. So we're just gonna jam the Coronet here and hope for the best. And I think we just attack our opponents. Or we can get rid of Gideon, since that means our opponent won't have a clock if they do have another Verdict. But I think getting the opponent down is important in case they have multiple Gideon of the Trials in hand, like we did last game. And then we'll just play the tapped Thicket, say go. Alright, this looks like a second Verdict, so that's too bad. But we are at 26 still, so we do have some time. And we'll just play out a Bogle here and say go. Wall of Omens. Gideon of the Trials gets in there once again. No blocks, and now we need to draw some running auras here. Another Spreading Seas is fine. Another Thicket to draw, not what we want. So we'll just say go. Gideon gets in. And this is Gideon Jura. That can force us to attack him. So yeah, we're definitely not winning this one. We're forced to attack Gideon Jura. Opponent can just block with their wall. I guess we can run out some Gladecover Scouts here. See if our opponent has another Verdict. But we're definitely not winning this one. So we might as well see some more of the opponent's cards. Another Spreading Seas, Serum Visions, Gideon of the Trials, and Gideon Jura both get in there. I think I'm interested in chum blocking the bigger one. Daybreak Coronet doesn't do anything. So we'll just say go here. No point attacking since we're just hitting for 1 extra damage. And we would rather chum block. Both Gideons get activated. Gideon ally of Zendikar also makes an appearance. Both Gideons get in there. We'll chum the bigger one. Take 4 down to 6. Gideon makes an emblem. For us to draw, so we'll just have to pass it back. So we might reconsider Path to Exile, as it does get rid of those Gideons if they do get activated. But it's kind of a card that we want when we're losing and not when we're ahead. So we'll concede here. Still don't think we want the paths, since it only does something when we're behind and need to get rid of an attacking Gideon, which doesn't happen if we have a big Bogle in play. Might reconsider the Unflinching Courage. So perhaps we want to get rid of one of our weaker auras like Spirit Mantle, which only lets us attack past those 2/2 tokens, which doesn't seem super relevant. Still don't think we want anything else. So I think we'll run it like this and hope to get there. Would definitely like to play first. And this hand looks quite good. Don't have a Totem Armor card for the Gladecover Scout, but we do have a very fast start this time. with multiple powerful enchantments, so I think we have to keep this one and hope to dodge Supreme Verdict. So we'll lead with Scout. Next turn we can go Rancor plus Ethereal Armor and be off to the races. Let's suit up our Gladecover Scout. Get in for 5. We don't care about Spreading Seas here. Mana Leak would be a little annoying, and Wall of Omens is also not a big deal. So I think we want to lead with Ethereal Armor. If our opponent has Mana Leak, we resolve the Coronet, which is more important. And there's a Mana Leak. And now we get in for 9. And our opponent's dead next turn if they can't interact here. Even a Wall of Omens will not save them. So they need something pretty specific. I guess Gideon of the Trial, make an emblem, would buy them a turn so that they can Supreme Verdict on the following turn. Instead, Spreading Seas is not gonna do it. And there we go. Sweet. A very fast start this time, and we're able to overpower blue-white Gideons. Alright, we're on the play. And this hand unfortunately doesn't have any creature, so this one we'll have to send back. This hand on the other hand is quite good, and we want to scry a land to the top here. And that one definitely needs to stay on top. Alright, so we can lead with a tapped Sunpetal Grove. Unfortunately can't play the Bogle turn 1, but we will be able to play Spiritdancer next turn if we wish to do so. Eldrazi Temple from the opponent, so could be an Eldrazi Taxes deck, could be Eldrazi Tron. So definitely have an interesting decision here. We can go Bogle Hyena Umbra, we can go Suppression Field, or we can go Kor Spiritdancer and then set up for a big turn next turn. Opponent could have Dismember if they're playing the Eldrazi Tron deck, which would get rid of the Spiritdancer. Suppression Field doesn't do all that much in the early game if they don't have Expedition Map, if they're Eldrazi Tron. I think we just Spiritdancer and hope they don't have Dismember. And then next turn we can go Bogle plus Hyena Umbra. So let's just play the Spiritdancer. And say go. And alright, looks like the opponent did not have Dismember. You're gonna play out Ghost Quarter. And is this a Matter Reshaper? It is. That's fine. Against Eldrazi Tron, they did not have Dismember turn 1, so they don't have actually a ton of interaction for the Spiritdancer. So I think we just suit up our Spiritdancer rather than the Bogle. Even though we lose out on the Hexproof part. Find a Forest. So we can get in for 3, play out Suppression Field, and say go, or we can keep up Path to Exile in case our opponent plays a Thought-Knot Seer next turn, which we could path in response. I kind of like keeping up Path to Exile, since the Suppression Field isn't gonna do much at this point yet. Once the opponent starts using Walking Ballistas or activating Karn, then of course having the Suppression Field in play is valuable. But for now, opponent reveals Path to Exile. Interesting, so the opponent's actually probably playing some sort of banned Eldrazi deck rather than your typical colorless Eldrazi deck, which means Path on Spiritdancer is actually quite painful. So we might want to switch gears, play the Bogle, but we don't have any enchantments to go with it, so it's not like we're gonna deal a ton of damage next turn. So instead we might want a Suppression Field to cut off our opponent's Ghost Quarter, in case they don't have white mana for the Path to Exile that got revealed, and they can't Ghost Quarter themselves that way unless they pay 2. So sure, let's Suppression Fields and hope we don't get Thought-Knot Seared. Instead, looks like the opponent's stuck on 2 lands and they'll have to go to discard. Discard Lingering Souls. Alright, now I'm a little confused, so I guess our opponent's playing an Eldrazi Taxes deck after all and not a banned Eldrazi deck. Alright, with that information, probably was incorrect to suit up the Spiritdancer since of course our opponent's gonna have Path to Exile, perhaps Fatal Push. But we did not get punished yet, and our opponent seems to be stuck on 2 colorless lands. So let's just get in for 3. Unfortunately, our draw did not cooperate quite yet. So we'll just have to play the Grove, play the Bogle, and say go. Looks like our opponent hasn't found a land, discards another Lingering Soul, so we draw another Plains. So both of the decks not really functioning at full capacity. But usually the mana screwed opponent ends up beating the mana flooded opponent. So hopefully we can draw a few enchantments before our opponent kills the Spirit Dancer. Still no land for the opponent. As they keep discarding Lingering Souls, well, so now we have an interesting decision of Spirit Mantling the Spirit Dancer. It means we get the +2/+2 bonus, as well as drawing the extra card. Means that we would be hitting for 7 right now and putting the opponent dead next turn if they don't find white mana, or just any mana in general. If we enchant the Bogle, then we would just be attacking for 5 and drawing an extra card. I think we actually have to take the risky line of enchanting the Spirit Dancer, and if we draw into another aura we might be able to actually kill the opponent pretty quickly here. So we instead draw another Sunpetal Grove. But at least we're attacking for 7 here. And if our opponent misses one more turn on a land, they're just dead. So let's play the Grove and say go. And did they hit? They hit a forest. Wow. So the opponent playing all sorts of colors. And they're in fact going to Ghost Quarter themselves to get the white mana to path our Spirit Dancer here. Which is unfortunate. And they should path us before we get to play any more auras, which is a draw step, and there we see the path to exile on the Spirit Dancer right on time. Not much we can do about it. We will get another land out of the deck, don't have many of those left. And unfortunately just get in for 1, as we draw another land for the turn. On the bright side, the opponent only has 2 lands at this point, so they're still not out of it yet. And there's a Scavenging Ooze, which could start exiling their own Matter Reshaper, so I think we just actually path to exile this. We might get better targets later, but don't want to take any risks, and we might actually be able to get in enough damage early here that pathing the Ooze is worth it. Of course, now we're giving the opponent black mana for Lingering Souls potentially. Instead they just get a waste, so they might not even have a basic swamp. So I'm kind of confused as to what our opponent's playing there, but we will get in for 1. And if we draw another enchantment to go with the Coronet, we're in pretty good shape. But this might be a Thought-Knot Seer from the opponent. Instead it's a Birds of Paradise. And a flashbacked Lingering Souls. Alright, so opponent's at 3. Can we draw an aura? We can, and it's a very good one. Rancor, Daybreak Coronet should be enough to get the job done here. As our opponent, even if they triple chump, still take 3. Alright, so things did work out in the end, but I'm still very much confused about our opponent's deck. It looks like a 3-color Abzan Eldrazi deck. They did not have basic swamp, it looked like. What do we sideboard here? We did not see any fetch lands out of the opponent, so Suppression Field might actually be pretty weak. So we might actually want to take that one out and I guess add another Path to Exile, even though Path is pretty weak against Lingering Souls. So I think we just run it like this. And yep, this hand's definitely good. Even against the discard spell, we still have the second Scout. And then 2 auras to go with it, as well as the Spirit Dancer. Opponent leads with Temple once again. And we're just gonna play out Gladecover Scout and say go. And now we have to decide if we want to run out the Spirit Dancer or suit up the Scout right away. Alright, so the opponent does have a fetch land, so maybe taking out the Suppression Fields was a mistake there. So we see Temple Garden into Birds of Paradise. And we don't have double white yet for the Coronet, but we can double Spider Umbra, the Gladecover Scout. I think we just want a Spirit Dancer though, since getting this in play seems pretty powerful when we have all these auras. And if our opponent has a path, that means we just get to get our white mana for the Coronet. So let's just play out the Spirit Dancer. Say go. Now our opponent gets to play a big Eldrazi. Instead it's just a Duress. Probably gonna get the Coronet, even though we can't cast it at the moment. Could see them take the Spirit Mantle as well. And they do in fact go for the Spirit Mantle. Another Eldrazi Temple. Do they have a Thought-Knot Seer? Or a Reality Smasher? They do in fact have the Reality Smasher on 3. So that's gonna get in there, presumably. Yep, we'll take it. And a Ledgewalker to draw, so I think we just start with Spider Umbra. Now the question is, which creature do we target? They have 2 cards left in hand. If one of those is Path to Exile and we go all in on Spirit Dancer, that's pretty awkward. I think we start by playing 1 Umbra on the Spirit Dancer, and then we might reevaluate after the draw from the Spirit Dancer. Alright, Path to Exile, that's a good one. So we could get in for 4 and then just path the Reality Smasher and then discard a random creature that we don't need. Or we can actually Spider Umbra this turn as well, draw an extra card, get in for some extra damage, and then deal with the Smasher next turn, which also seems reasonable. But this time actually we might want to enchant the Scout, since then if we do find second white source we can play the Coronet on the Scout, which is a lot safer than doing it on the Spirit Dancer. So I think we actually play this on the Scout. Try to hit our 3rd land drop, which we do. So I think we just attack with both and then play a Gladecover Scout, which doesn't do a whole lot yet, but might do so in the future. And then we can discard the Ledgewalker to the Reality Smasher's ability when we path. And now the Smasher is gonna stay on defense as we draw Sunpetal Grove. So now we can pretty safely run out the Coronet on the Scout. Draw a card from Spirit Dancer, even though it's pretty clear our opponent does not have the Path to Exile. And now we get to Rancor as well. Draw a card, find Ethereal Armor. We might want to play around Blessed Alliance, in which case we could suicide in the Gladecover Scout as well. But of course our opponent could, in the end of combat phase, still Blessed Alliance after the Gladecover Scout died, and then get rid of the other one, but our opponent might not know that interaction. I kind of feel like Blessed Alliance is one of the few ways we lose, so we might as well kind of play around it if our opponent doesn't know the end of combat interaction. So sure. Let's get in there with both. Opponent does block the 1/1, takes 7, down to 4, and looks like they did not have Blessed Alliance, which is fine. We're still in a good spot here. Ghost Quarter. It looks like our opponent's flooding out a bit. And now we can play out Ethereal Armor as well. Draw a card. Find a Rancor. And I guess we path the Reality Smasher first. Discarding the Ledgewalker. And then we can Rancor on the, I guess, Spirit Dancer as well. Draw an extra card. And attack with both. Alright, sweet, managed to beat 4-color Eldrazi. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series, so if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.